Okay, here we go. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Elizabeth, if you could grab the lights, please. Thank you. So yesterday we left off with the Romantic writers. We looked at the German writers. No, we didn't look at the German writers yet. We were about to look at the German writers. We were looking at the English writers yesterday. Mary Shelley with Frankenstein. We looked at Lord Byron in his slightly dirty off-color work. Oops, wrong button. Ah! Here's Napoleon. He's doing his Napoleonic stuff. Woo, there we go. We talked about Samuel Taylor Coleridge with the Rime of the Ancient Mariner and the symbolism there. We're coming back to symbolism. We're coming back to religion. We're bringing all that stuff back away from the Enlightenment, very stark, very reasonable, very basic. We had William Wordsworth. He's mourning the loss of his childhood by growing up to become an adult because we can't have fun anymore because we're adults. He obviously didn't have children with imaginations. And then these two folks that we've already mentioned. Here is our guy, Lord Byron, in his wonderful suit. Where's my... Oh goodness, where am I? And then we get into the German writers. These folks are novel writers. They're not poets. They're not essay writers. They're novelists. They often are very sentimental, very schmaltzy, lots of schmooze. Lots of actual romance. Purely realistic description was avoided. The grass was green. Nope, not a romantic statement. The grass was a lush, verdant pasture of different shades of green, from grass to emerald to, and you're like, the grass is green. No, it's not. It's this lush, verdant pasture. You're like, okay, I get the description. Good. They're an interesting thing to read. That's for sure. We have Friedrich Schlegel. It's a good German, thick-throated name, Schlegel. He was going against prejudices against women. He said, this is ridiculous. Women are good. Women are valuable. We need women. Let's be friendly to the women. In his early romantic novel, Lucinda. Lucinda was one of those, like, okay, this is the touchstone. This is where we're starting, and we move on from there. They were getting more involved, and this is a symbol of, or a example of the Romantics. They were starting to get involved in social issues, exposing kind of an early form of a muckraker, where they look at the social issues of the day, talk about it, explain it, but they're not trying to change anything. They're not Upton Sinclair in that sense, where I'm going to change the meatpacking industry by writing about nasty meat. For those of you who got to read The Jungle. Those of you who haven't, though, like, they chat about it. And like, because they're realistic, but they're painting the picture like our book says. It was very shocking to people because they talked about how he talks about how Lucinda was the perfect partner in all ways to her husband and helpmeet. And people are like, whoa, we don't write about that. And he's like, why? It's part of our life. So it kind of made people a little flappy. They got nervous about it, but it was opening up this new deal. And then we get Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. He was a part romantic mode, part critic of romantic excess. He's like, yep, this is good. We can be romantic, but we don't have to be so over the top and so explanatory and so all of this stuff. He writes a lot. He's a very prolific author. His first book was The Sorrows of Young Werther, nice German name there. It's a novel, of course. It's a series of letters. This is a common way of writing at this time, where instead of having a novel format where you tell the story is told through letters back and forth between characters. Makes for an interesting way to read a book. But that was common in romantic literature. So we have this book. People really liked this book because it had so much feeling in it. So full of feels all over the place. And living outside the bounds of polite society, we're pushing the border. It's not just man meets wife. Wife is subservient. They live together and raise 7 kids in the countryside. Hooray! No, we're pushing the boundaries. We're feeling things all the time. But then his real big deal is his work Faust. This is one of those touchstone writing things that comes up on Jeopardy. It comes up in any type of deal because it's considered one of the works of the Romantic era. And it's a very dramatic poem, very long poem. Super long poem. 2 books of long poetry. Part 1 was the story of this man named Faust, who makes a pact with the devil because he wants to know everything that man knows. He wants to know it all. And so he makes a pact with the devil so that he has greater knowledge than other human beings possess. And throughout the story, has anybody gotten to touch Faust at all? Been exposed to this? It's also an opera. People may have seen it there. It's a lyrical ballet as well. They've taken Faust and made it into all sorts of different things. I'm really surprised it hasn't shown up into some movie variation, which it might have. But he falls in love with a lady named Gretchen, and Gretchen is just this wonderful person. But because he has this pact with the devil and he knows everything, he can't, he has this problem of, I know everything, Gretchen is dead, and I have to continue to live because I have this pact with the devil. There's a lot of wailing, a lot of gnashing of teeth, a lot of, oh, this is just so awful, I want to be with Gretchen, but I can't. And then we have Faust 2, which was written much later. And he decides what Faust does, or what Faust does is he decides to take this knowledge, and instead of beating his head with it, he decides to use his knowledge to try to better the people. Huzzah. And so whatever time he has left, he's going to use his vast knowledge to make humankind better. And he hopes that by doing this, that he will be able to help people overcome their feelings of need. They're striving to be better because he was striving to be better, and it made him make a pact with the devil, and through the series of unfortunate events, he lost Gretchen. Oh, I had to read it in college. It was one of those ones where I had to read it walking up and down the dorm hall so I didn't fall asleep. What's going on with Faust? Keep reading Faust's story. And my professor loved Faust. Probably would have married Faust if she had the capability. We're all like, we're not seeing the love, lady. But if that's your passion, you have at her. So we get this 2-part story. And once he decides, this is the great, because we have this big dramatic story, 2 books worth, and the ending is boom, and done. That's how we're going to wrap this all up. Once he realizes that he can use his knowledge for better, the pact with the devil is broken, and he dies and goes to heaven. Well, that was a quick wrap up. Good for you, Faust. You're with Gretchen again. Yes?
Do you think it's maybe because the author died the same year that the part 2 was released?
Yes. I think that he probably knew he was sick and get this story over with so we don't have an Edward Drood type deal. Mm-hmm. So, Edwin Drood, yes. It's a story by Dickens. He died before we finished writing it, so now people kind of play choose your own adventure ending with it, what's going to happen, and they turned it into a theater show, which the theater department did it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
In England, they have this theme park where it's Dickens World or something like that, and all the characters are walking around and talking to people.
Really?
Yeah.
I have to tell my 9th grade English teacher. we're friends on Facebook. She's the reason why I teach the way I do, because she taught me that you don't have to be Bueller type teacher. You can just be crazy. She'd wear masks almost every day. It was awesome. She was awesome. And she was a former nun who had this humongous, I can show you a picture, she still has it, this humongous cloud of red curly hair, and she was the first person I ever knew to have acrylic fingernails. And they were long and always bright red. And I was like, those are awesome. And it was always funny when she'd lose one in class, because it was a very big deal, because everything was a very big deal to Miss Carol Cartier. She's awesome. So the best day was when she acted out a whole whole Dickinson drama of the beginning. She acted out the first half of David Copperfield, and she had a big gravestone in her classroom, and she was dressed as a thief, and we were all like, we don't know what's going on, but sure, we'll play along. And she's like in your face, and we're like, hi, come with me, and we'd go running down the hall. Okay, we're coming. I don't know what we're doing. It was so cool. She was so awesome. But so we have these two guys. Dickens World.
Something like that.
So David Copperfield's walking down the road.
Yeah.
Miss Havisham is walking down the road.
And they had like the great grandson or like niece or nephew or someone
Yeah.
related to Charles Dickens, and they had him come like visit. And he was talking to kids.
So Oliver's walking around with his bowl. Please, sir, could I have some more?
Yeah.
I need to go. First, I need to get to Wizarding World, but then, I'm so going to Dickens World. What? Yeah, are you going? Have you been? Oh, let's go. Would that not be would that be creepy or no? No. No. Okay.
I want to go.
So-
I would I would stay there and hide so that when they close down, I'd be really rough.
See how it all works. Okay, so now getting into art, going to painting. We always are playing off earlier aspects in art. The Rococo artists were looking to the Renaissance ideas, the pastels, the big over the top. We had neoclassicals going to the ancient world, columns, marble things. Now the Romantics are going to medieval. We're going even farther back to the medieval world, or not farther than the neoclassics, but the Rococos, farther back than Rococos. We like that to them the Middle Ages represented social stability, religious reverence, because remember, religion had been removed for so long, we didn't like that. So we wanted to bring religion back. So they supported the church and saw liberalism as evil. We see this in architecture and we see it in art. Romantic architecture closely models that of the Gothic architecture of the Middle Ages. Think Notre Dame Cathedral. Lots of gargoyles and spires and flying buttresses and things of that nature. We're going to be building from there. This gets a little weird in my head because like every art, it takes a while for it to sink in. But we looked at nature a lot, and we looked at the nature of the sublime. And we really liked nature because you could get strong emotions from nature. And it could really make you feel things. Now, I hope you're getting the point of romantics. We feel a lot, and we're not afraid to feel. That's another thing. We're not afraid to feel. It's not like we're repressed and torturous. We like to feel. That sounds a little off kilter, but you know what I mean. Like, we don't, shut up, busters. Okay, so, and looking at nature, we started to question ourselves and our personality and what do we know, what do we not know, how do we know what we know? We don't know. And so we go back and forth with this idea. We raise questions, how much are we in control of ourselves? And people are like, I don't know. And it bothered them. And so they wanted to look at that in their art. Because nature was a set, like our book says, nature was a set of infinite forces that overwhelm the smallness of humankind. We are just us. How many of you felt this? Like, I haven't traveled a lot, but like when I see like the ocean and I'm like, that thing is huge and I am this person and there's all that out there. Or when I think of like Lewis and Clark, like, yep, we're leaving St. Louis. We don't know where we're going, but we're going. Or the first time you've seen the mountain. How many of you remember the first time you saw like the ocean or the mountains or the Grand Canyon and you're like, whoa. You know that feeling of whoa?
Outer space.
What?
That's how I feel when I think about outer space, and it creeps me out and I just can't. Like,
That's the whole feeling, like I'm so small.
that's why I can't take a straw on me.
That's why, well, you've been there where I get like totally wigged out on space. I can't handle it. That's how they were feeling, like we can't handle nature because it's so big and it's so infinite and there's so many things that we know and so many things we don't know. And I'm just me. And I'm so insignificant. And that kind of twisted with their brains a little bit. And so we have some naturalist painters, Caspar David Friedrich and Joseph Mallord William Turner. Great long name there. And this is looking at, between these two, they symbolize the contradictory forces affecting Romantic artists. The sense of power, awe, and mastery of nature, coupled with the fact that we're encroaching on nature. And this was a problem for Romantic artists. That we have nature, but yet we're also starting the factory system. So we have this beautiful forest, this virgin forest of trees that have never been touched by man, and we're cutting them down to build a factory. So many feels about that. And they can't take that all in. So we have a lot of paintings here where we have nature and then like a train going through it. And we're like, I can't handle this difference. Here's a beautiful romantic painting here. This is from John Constable. The sublime power of nature. I mean, you can't get much more nature than this. Look at the dramatic clouds. A flippin' rainbow. A rainbow, people. We've got the woods area. We've got the river. We've got the man with the oxen fording the river. And yet we have the... What?
What are those?
I said ox, but maybe they're horses.
They look like donkeys.
Mules. Sorry.
I'm not sure. Some form of four-legged hauling creature. Horses, donkeys. Maybe they're mules. We haven't thrown out a mule yet.
Oh, was it you?
Emily, you said mule?
Yeah,
Good job.
I said donkey, and then she's like,
I just mixed the donkey.
Well, a mule is a donkey and a horse together. Yeah. It's a weird creature. And then we also have the neo-Gothic architecture, tall spires, tall windows, let lots of light in so that we can see nature and be part of nature instead of tiny little windows, tiny little things. So, there's an example there. We also have that this is a painting by Caspar David Friedrich. This is the Polar Sea. This is on page 421 of your book. The Polar Sea. This is the ice shoves of the polar region. See, just like Lake Michigan.
why are they that color? That's not the color they are.
Wasn't there. I don't know why you painted them slightly yellow. What? No, I didn't hear. I just didn't hear what you said. Okay. Yes, mules cannot reproduce because they're such a freakazoid creature. Once you have a mule, there's just a mule.
Did you know that there's a thing as a polar bear? A grizzly bear and a polar bear combined? A roller bear.
I've not heard of that. What are you mentioning here? Oh, you're looking at the ship on the painting? Is that what you ladies are looking at?
The ship?
Yes.
I don't think that's accurate. Which was
What? Where is the ship?
Wouldn't the ship be bigger than that?
No. It's showing like the creations of like the power of nature is so much more powerful than anything we can create. So we have these giant ice shoves.
On the right. It's that brown.
Like it's the brown thing. This is the ship. Because it get caught. Yeah. I kind of randomly did this. And obviously you were supposed to see the ship from that. Yeah, here's the boat. And it's to show that the power of nature totally overcomes anything we can do. Which to me is kind of a depressing thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we are so insignificant to what nature can do. So why do we even attempt, is my question. Wah, wah.
I mean, at the same time, we're kind of significant in the effects that we have on nature, though,
Well,
with climate change.
As a species, not as an individual.
Well, yeah.
But are we still insignificant as a species compared to nature?
clean it up.
In some areas, like, if all of us tried to drain the ocean, even if every person on the planet worked together, the ocean would still destroy us. But like, if we tried to do other things, like destroy the environment.
We can do that very easily.
We can't eliminate nature, but we can change how it works. And we're changing it.
Every moment.
Yeah, we are.
But isn't that kind of a want feeling?
Yeah.
A little bit?
Yeah.
So, we have, yes, so we have paintings like this. Nature is so overwhelming. Then we get this one from our book. This is by Joseph Mallord William Turner. And this is supposed to show tension, friends. Shh, tension. Do you feel the tension in this painting? We should feel tension. Yes, it is a railroad track. Yes.
Are you artsy? Like, does that make sense to you? Because I look at that and I see schmearing. Why is this famous?
I see schmearing. I see myself as a left-handed person trying to color, and the left-handedness like wrecks the picture. I do because, one, I've taught this, this is my third time out, so I've encountered this painting now 3 times. The book explanations help me a lot, like, oh, I kind of see it, but I am the person that would go to a museum, and unless it was like Renaissance art, Mary, Joseph, Jesus, I would stand there and be like, yep. Like when we get into the 20th century art where it's a green rectangle and a red lightning bolt shape and a dot of blue, and it's supposed to show tension, anger, and peace, and I'm like, it's shapes. That looks like Trevor's art project.
I could like some nature art.
Like this?
Yeah, that's cool.
This works for you?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a little like trippy, but it's cool.
But this one.
Yeah, this one. That doesn't really require that much talent.
I feel like with
That's how I feel about the postmodern art. Like, well, we'll see some where it just looks like cat scratches down the canvas, and I'm like,
I feel like
yes. And not the splatter paint like they do for shows like on America's Got Talent where they're splattering and all of a sudden there's Elvis that appears on the thing. But like, that's cool. But when they just kind of go, and it's like,
And here's $10,000.
yeah, and it shows peace. And I'm like, that shows to me angry mess on my kitchen floor that I'm screaming at children about.
Especially because like they don't know where they're gonna splatter the paint.
Right.
it just turns out they're like, okay, looks good, let's go.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so this is supposed to show, here's your interpretation. Ready, Quinn? This is supposed to show the railroad coming through, and the haziness is supposed to represent the tension that people feel. They want nature, they want the countryside, but they also want technology, and trains are really awesome. But how do we reconcile this together? It's blurred.
I thought the boringness would come from how fast the train is moving the bridge.
What?
Painted orange like the whole game.
Painted orange. But yeah, so the natural environment, the new industrial age, how do we make them come together? It's very difficult. Romantic religion. Romantic religion. We get some new religions here. All of these are coming off the Protestant shelf. And one of the biggest ones with Methodism. John Wesley was the leader. Do we have any Methodists here? Hello, yay. Do you know your faith history?
Yeah, I don't know. John Wesley just got a little upset. He was just like,
We're making our own religion.
it's not really that different than Luther.
No, it's not a lot different. But he pulls a Luther, and he pulls a Calvin. And he's like, I can't abide by this set of rules. I need to go and make it a little bit more different.
It's a little more God-loving and then not so much sin-hatred.
Yes, it's very, God-centric and very personal. What does religion mean for you? Not you as a herd, and we all follow the same rules, but let God into your heart and let him dictate to you how your conscience is going to react, not how we as a herd react. And so we have John Wesley as the leader. He wrote a lot of hymns with his brother Charles Wesley. And they just started, they just became their own church, and people followed. And it worked. And we don't, and this is showing also progress for Europeans. We didn't have to fight over it. There was no war. There was no anything. People are just like, you want to be Methodist? Good for you. Have at her. And they talked about that there is a potential to be perfect. And that's that whole non-focus on sin. We're Catholics, we talk about sin a lot. Bless us. And Lutherans, we talk about more of God as love versus God of fear and hate. But yet they're talking about, you know what, if you can find God in yourself and God tells you what you need to do to be perfect, well, then you can achieve it if you put your mind to it. So we're just advancing here. Yeah, that's Methodism. And then we've got some new continental religion, and these are religions based on feeling again, because we feel in this era. We have Chateaubriand, that is an author. He writes The Genius of Christianity in 1802, and he says there that the foundation of faith is emotion. How does faith make you feel? What does it do to your soul? What does it do to your heart? How does it make you feel? And the essence of religion is passion. That you have a feeling, that you are fired up by your faith. And if you're not fired up by your current faith, maybe you need to shop around for churches. Was his thought. Not my thought. Just throw that out there. Not my thought. You worship however you want. But Chateaubriand is telling us you should find that passion. Yes. Yes, you thirsty camel. This is your second time. Go ahead. Well, he filled it up at the beginning of class. Now he's thirsty again.
Camels don't drink a lot of water.
Yeah, but when they do, they drink a lot. So he's a thirsty camel. That's what I tell my kids when they're like, I need more water. And I'm like, you're going to pee the bed. No more water. So we debate. And then we have Schleiermacher. Everybody together. Schleiermacher. There it is. You gotta really let that in your throat, because that's a fun one. Schleiermacher. Schleiermacher speeches on religion to its cultured despisers, talking to people who don't have faith, and religion as an intuition or a feeling. That we should have feelings about faith. We should be reliant on our faith. It's not a reasonable thing, and that's okay that it's not reasonable, because really, when you boil it down, we're not reasonable. Absolute dependence on an infinite reality. God is out there. The afterlife is out there. We are dependent on that for some form of salvation. Rely on it. Make it your own. Bringing the feeling back. All right. Now we got nationalism and history showing up. And our main guy here is Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. It's a great name. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He is our first Romantic historian author. He is combined with... Oh, here he is. Sorry, I was reading ahead in my book. We're looking at Johann Gottfried Herder first here. Herder looks at culture. He doesn't like colonialism. He says that's not right. We're going back to that theory of colonialism is not appropriate. We shouldn't be taking people over. He was from Germany, and so he discusses a lot of the impact of the French Revolution and Napoleon on Germany, because that land was back and forth with the Congress of Vienna and the 100 Days and the march to Russia and everywhere else. And human beings develop organically. We're like plants. We grow over time. We develop, and I kind of see where he's coming from here. You start small, you grow, things impact you from the outside, things impact you from the inside, and you develop over time. You don't come out, this is similar to the blank slate theory. You don't come out knowing everything. It's got to be pressed upon you. He revived German folk culture, and that goes along with the Grimm brothers. These are the fairy tale writers, the brothers Grimm, Jacob and Wilhelm.
I read them. I read most of the stories.
They're a little messed up, where Cinderella, they're going to cut off her foot.
Yeah.
And the glass slippers were not actually glass, they were fur.
And
Yeah.
Little Red Riding Hood, her real name was Little Red Cap.
Yeah. Yeah, we changed it, like they changed it to make it a little more acceptable.
And then the Southerners got their eyes pecked out by birds.
Yes, that's not creepy at all. But he liked to bring, and this is important because he was creating a national culture. National culture, a German language, German folk tales, German songs, and identifying themselves with their culture, not with their leader. Bringing their culture in. And the Grimm brothers were that.
Johann was very young.
And so he's showing how we can embrace German culture. And then we get Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. And he's a philosopher, believed a predominant set of ideas, a thesis, your ideas, your conviction, is at odds with another idea, the antithesis. The patterns clash that result in a new synthesis. Isis. And this is, I like how we mentioned him, he is one of the most complicated and significant philosophers in the history of Western civilization. He believed that ideas develop in an evolutionary fashion, that you don't just wake up one morning and say, oh, that's a new idea, but that over time and experience you get these new ideas because you're constantly being pushed upon. That is your thesis. Then you have things that challenge that idea, and those are the antithesis or antithesis. And then once you counterbalance those two together, and you come up with a new solution that combine the thesis and then what you learn through the antithesis, you have a synthesis. And then it starts all over. Then you get a new thesis, and the cycle keeps going. And he relates this to world history because he says that periods of world history receive their character from the patterns of thought that predominate during them. How we define an era is written by the people who make the history. Does that make sense? How we define an era is written by the people who make the history. The great men. Napoleon, Robespierre, Medici, Luther. That's what define it. The great men theory. I'm writing about it right now for my grad test. Because this is a big historical discussion. Who writes the history? Is it the leaders or the everyday people? And depending on your school of historiography, some would say it's one, the other, and one says it's neither, and it's the evolutionary force behind the era. That one makes your head spin a little bit. But the great men or the everyday people? And all cultures are valuable because they all play a part in this. They all are coming together to make this work together. So then, is that we good? To me, it reminds me of the scientific method. You have an idea. You test it. You see that maybe you weren't so right, and then you start over again. Islam and Romanticism. How is that working together? People are liking Islam more. Remember, during the Enlightenment, they said that Islamic faith was very passive, that people were walked all over because of their faith. Now we're starting to see it in a little bit better light. Learning about Islam became a really in-fashion thing under Napoleon. It became cool to know about the Islamic people and the Islamic faith. They were getting the ideas of Romanticism and looking at different cultures really played into this because Islamic culture was a whole new thing for Europeans. We've had it tucked in there across time with the Renaissance and rise in education, again with the Enlightenment and rise of education, but now we're looking at it from not just an educational standpoint, but looking at some of their literature. How many of you have read 1001 Nights or have been introduced to the Thousand Tales, where a lady had to become the man's concubine, this king's concubine, and she said, if I keep telling you stories that entertain you, I won't become your concubine. And so she tells him stories for 100,001 nights. And by the end, I want to say that she entertained him so much that she just became an important member of his household, and he didn't make her his slave. So that became popular again, their use of literature, their stories, their ideas, and their culture. So showing how their culture was similar yet different, and playing off those differences became a big deal for the Romantics. And then we get the Rosetta Stone. This was a huge historical moment because we knew about ancient Egypt, we knew about the pharaohs, but nobody knew how to read hieroglyphics. And then they found this chunk of stone, the Rosetta Stone, that had hieroglyphics on it, and they were able to read it. They were able to decipher it and read it, and then with that, they were able to understand, to a larger context, Egyptian history and culture, and show how Egypt was a melting pot of its day, that it was the Egyptian culture, it had the Ottoman and the Turks coming in, it had the Greeks influencing, the Romans influencing, and we opened up so much more history once we were able to read the hieroglyphics of Egypt, and bringing all that culture together. And so the implication was that if Egypt and Islam were to be understood, it would have to be through European, if not necessarily Christian, categories of thought. So they took what was Egyptian, they took what was Islamic, and put the European spin on it, because that's all they knew. That's how they were going to understand it. Christian or not, enlightened or not, it didn't matter, but they were going to start understanding it a little bit better. Here we have a wonderfully dramatic painting of when Napoleon invaded Egypt in 1799. This is the French winning against the Egyptians, or the Islamic people in Egypt. Painted by Baron Antoine Gros. It emphasizes French heroism and Muslim defeat. And this is how most Europeans looked at the Islamic faith in the Islamic world, that they are easily taken over and killed. So Napoleon, Islam, we got people like falling under the horses, under here. It's just a very, very, very dramatic painting that's on page 424 of your book. So, that is Romanticism. Yes, Miss Charlie Fisher. Go ahead. Okay. Do we have any questions now that I can answer? Anything we want to rediscuss? Anything we want to relook at?